السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. مغفر الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. All grace and praise are due to the Most High, who has given us life after our death, after our twin brother of sleep. Today I want to kind of discuss three particular topics, and I've discussed it before, and I really hadn't seen too many views on it, but it may be because we don't understand the importance of the subject matter. Everything that I discuss, when you bake a cake or you bake a pie, a lot of times the top of the cake or the top of the pie, the top of the cornbread, the top or whatever is cooked, but the inside isn't, and that's called half baked. And so a lot of times there are subject matters that we cling on to, we champion off the top, and our thought patterns are half baked. The greatest gift that is free is knowledge. The greatest gift that is free is knowledge, because knowledge, or the lack thereof, can change the course of one's defining themselves, one's thought patterns, one's perspective on life. And true knowledge helps the individual benefit productively and positively. Information is not necessarily knowledge. You can get on Wikipedia, you can get on Google, you can get information, but knowledge is when you're able to take that information and apply it and be better at it. And the word education comes from the word exeducere, which means to exit out or to put out what you've taken in. If you just take things in but you never apply, then it's just information. It's not knowledge. So for the street brothers and the street sisters who think that you have knowledge, if you're not applying anything, or even for the for those everyday laymen, be they Christian or Jew or atheist or whatever, it's universal. Information. You get information from a newspaper, you can get information from a magazine, a majala, you can get a jarida, you can get a jarid, you can get it from a books. You get it from, information comes from everything, but the main thing is being able to apply. I talked about, and this is a sensitive subject, I talked about Islamic view on abortion. I just saw this morning the Roe versus Wade, and 26 states have limited it or are close to trying to make it illegal. And I've said that Islamically, and primarily every way of life believes that life is sacred, and a child's life is sacred, and therefore, and Islam is no different than that. And there are illah, there are shurut, there are conditions, there are exceptions, and those exceptions are based upon the fact of whether it would harm the mother or harm the baby, and in that particular aspect. Promiscuity is something in this country that is irresponsible, is enjoyable. There's an old saying that says that sex is the poor man's or the poor woman's opera. Which means, because opera costs money. It costs cash money to go to the opera. And most people that go to operas are people that are wealthy or rich. Depends on what term, there's a big difference today about who's wealthy and who's rich. I mean, it really makes no difference. If you're only making $18,000 a year, all that right there is just fluff. But it says that sex is the rich man's or rich woman's opera because it costs nothing to do. Of course, it costs down the road if there are children from it, but it costs nothing. It costs nothing to source the poor person's opera. No money, no nothing. So now these 26 states are discussing this particular topic. And I would like to say the reason that so many are discussing this topic, and most ethnicities are asleep. You know, the sleeping giant again, are asleep. So let me try to wake you up. And this has been going on for the past, we're talking about the 80s, man, that certain ethnicities have not been producing it, have been infertile. And so other ethnicities are fertile and they're producing children. And so as one group is not producing and another group is producing, then eventually the numerical numbers is going to be the same. And then there are people who don't want that. Because when it becomes the same, then your ability to vote, your numbers, regarding the electoral votes and all these other, and especially what is more important is the votes in the states, the governors, the congressmen, the senators. Those right there really make most of the laws, not the president. So these things are, it's champion, and you see the women and they're saying, "It's my body, it's my right." Alhamdulillah, all thanks to Allah, that you have a body, that you created a female and that you reproduce if you choose to, and all of that is true. But the whole purpose of this thing is to minimize. And I read somewhere, and don't paraphrase me, don't kill me off if I'm wrong, but it said that if they could stop a certain ethnicity from having abortions, that they could create the population, they can increase their population by about 75% just by stopping abortion. Of course, we know that many women are still going to get abortions, and some are going to get abortions that are dangerous because it's not legal in certain states now, and there's a whole host of other problems that's going to come from that. The psychology is in Islam, and I guess other ways, is that life is sacred. Do we have a right to take a life that is living and a life that is going to live? Both on both ends, the one that's coming in the world and the one that's already in the world. If you say that it's forbidden to take one that is already in the world, then the logical conclusion is that it would be wrong to take one that's coming in the world, even if it's in your body. Think of that. But there's politics, this thing. There's three ways, and I think I've said this before, there's three ways to shape the consciousness of a society, and then there's three ways in order to ensure that that goes. The first is the philosophy, and that is to start a mantra or start a slogan or start a tantra with just say no, war on drugs, war on crime, war on this, war on that, and start that off. The second is that to get the PhDs, the MDs, the BAs, the MAs, and all these people here, the MSWs, the LMSWs, to accredit what the philosophy is and to validate it. Then comes the propaganda. And this is through the television, through the media, social media, magazines, educational books, libraries, newspapers, television, movies. All of these are means of propaganda, and they give social accreditation to the philosophy in the beginning. So these three things: the philosophy, the psychology, which is the so-called experts, and then the propaganda. And give you an example of how this works for you young generations and you who are not that young. Around 1977, they told told young mothers, especially African American, Hispanic mothers, mothers of minority ethnicities, that Similac and other types of supplemental milk for children was more beneficial than natural breast milk. Huh? Back in the 70s. So then all of a sudden in the 90s they turn around and they tell them, no, breast milk is better. But what was the purpose of misleading people for two generations, almost 20 years? At money. 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 And why change it? When you say, well, when we got information that that conflicted with it, then we changed the perspective. My belief is that they already knew, but it was about the money. And my saying this is that this is what happens when you tell people back in the 70s. You tell them, you say, yo, don't have children, but don't have no man. And you basically tell the man not to be there, but to help produce the child. So go there, produce the child, help produce the child, impregnate the person, and then leave. I don't care where you go, just don't be with her. Now, inherent memory is something that is a difference of opinion on. The Bible says up to the sins of the father will fall on the child up to the third generation. And this is from a spiritual sense, but also we're talking genetics, because if a person does something for 5, 6, 7, 8 years and it passes on to their child, and that child passes on to the grandchild. So inherent memory. And again, nature versus nurture. Is this nature that began back then? Because at one point, minority ethnicities were marrying. They were marrying, especially after slavery. They wanted to marry because they had been deprived of it. So they were marrying, and they were marrying young. We're talking about 17, 16, 15. This is a fact. I did a census and they said something like 1921, but I mean, I don't know who they got the information from, but I know in my community they were young. A lot of them soon as out of high school. A lot of them before out of high school, and this is something I saw. The paradigm was different back then. There was not really birth control was not accessible to a lot of people. It cost. And so a lot of people didn't use it. So marriage was a thing just in case a young lady got pregnant and she didn't want to shame her family, because more people back then were more religious. So there was a stigma. And so nobody wanted that stigma on their family, on their house, so marry early. And the mindset was like, that boy's getting ready to smell himself, get him a wife. That girl, she's getting ready to smell herself, get her a husband. And that was the norm. Now, in 2022, there's a different, because people don't know the history of their own people, of their grandmothers and their great-grandmothers right here in this country, and the rituals and the reason things changed. And then it's easy to sit up and say, oh, that was crazy, A lot of people back then would have been considered to be pedophiles. So definitely. Fact. So this, going back to the abortion thing, this is about numbers, man. This is about numbers. And you have to stop sleeping. We go back to the 80s with the prison industrial system. And that once they said that, they gave, and I can't remember exactly the number, something like 2023, that the numerical order of America, the demographics, and so forth would be roughly the same with all the ethnicities. Two ethnicities combined would be roughly the same of the majority ethnicity. That all of a sudden, they started building again. They started building all these prisons. They started in vitro fertilization, test tube babies, surrogate motherhood. What was that for? Somebody sit down and think. Why? It was just a scientific breakthrough. No, there was a reason. There was a purpose. And the purpose was to augment the birth rate because certain people were not having children. They were infertile. And as a Muslim, I see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He makes people fertile individually and collectively. He's in control of life and He makes other people infertile. I mean, you talk about the story of Musa alayhi salam and Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, I'm going to kill all the firstborn. You talk about with Herod and Jesus, where they was looking for the Messiah, where they was looking for this prophet, when the three wise men. I mean, it wasn't like there was anybody that know he wasn't coming. All the signs was there. Since time immemorial, there's always been this thing of population and trying to keep down certain things, or certain people, or certain groups. So that's the first thing I want you to understand, man. This is not just CSI. Islam is political, and politics in Islam is the same, but there's a spiritual ambiance in it. It's bigger than us. And again, true Muslims were not, Islam is not nationalistic, it's not, but Islam is against oppression. Whoever may be oppressed, my Indian brothers, when they're oppressed, I hurt. When my Ukrainian brothers are oppressed, I'm hurt. When my African brothers are oppressed, I'm hurt. My South American brothers, I'm hurt because Allah, God, He hates oppression. He hates ignorance. And so therefore He wants all of us not to be oppressed, and He wants all of us not to be ignorant. The other thing is that this inherent thing that is going on with primarily violence towards one another up under different groups and sets, and some of these places, you're worse than the Hatfields and the McCoys. The Hatfield and the McCoys was two white groups that fought each other in West Virginia. We're talking about, I forgot the number of years, but like almost 100 years, they fought against each other. And after so much bloodshed, it just becomes a thing, I hate you and you hate me. And really, a lot of people can't really pinpoint exactly. The Hatfield and McCoys, they could pretty much pinpoint to some extent when it began. And some of you groups, wherever you're at, whatever city, in the hood, killing off yourselves, hurting yourselves behind ego trips and power trips and all these other trips. I say to you, as a person who's been there, done that, in the long run, it's not beneficial. When a thing talks about damaging the soul, and also the soul is also part of the psyche, and the only people who are not damaged are people who are sociopaths and psychopaths. Sociopaths and psychopaths, people who have no conscience. Because if you have a conscience, then guess what? When you go to sleep at night, when you're not with your homies, when you're not with your big bro, it's gonna eat you up. It's gonna kill you from the inside out until you learn how to forgive yourself. And the only way, a lot of times, if you don't want to feel like you're weak by trying to forgive yourself, then the very first thing you're going to do the next day is do something even worse to put another layer on top of that to try to hide of what you did the day before that is really eating you up. So now you're compounding these areas of self-hatred. And the more you begin to hate self, the more you begin to hate your existence. And the more you hate your existence, then the more you are going to perpetually do self-destructive behavior. And this self-destructive behavior emanates in your environment until you become destructive to your environment. And when we begin to take pride in being self-destructive, then that is psychologically and emotionally and morally perverted. When you think you're taking props or you're getting props by hurting another brother, then something is definitely wrong there. When you think that when you get props for destruction and brothers are giving you, patting you on your back, telling you, yo, you that guy. Well done job. Then something is wrong. Been there, done that. I understand the psychology in this particular mindset. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody can make a person see the light of the tunnel. As the old saying goes, you can take a person to water, but you can't make them drink. But been there, done that. I don't really. I pray that I get to 1,000 subscribers because I really want to dialogue with people. I really want to have a live dialogue and conversation with people on these particular topics. I'm not just, I'm not just any type of person who doesn't know what they're talking about. Been there, done that. So I'm saying, when I hear this, and a lot of it is misplaced anger and misdirected aggression. You're angry at other things, but you direct your aggression to people who a lot of times don't even deserve it. 90% of the time don't even deserve it. But because you have this anger with inside, it just like a hose pipe that where the water is constantly rushing, but it's cut off. Eventually it breaks a sieve and the water is going everywhere, and this everywhere is the community. And people are ducking, children are getting hurt, all these different things because of misplaced anger. And the greatest anger is the anger at the self, where the person doesn't love themselves. So that's the second thing, man. I'm saying, and I wish, because you should love yourself. I was listening to an artist the other day, and yes, I do listen to different things and try to keep abreast of things. And all of his music was about death. And I'm like, this is what is called a hidaratul maut, or zakafi al-maut. This is the culture of death. I don't know who the Wizard of Oz was behind the curtain that perpetuates all of this death and makes you feel like that is cool. That is not cool. Death is not cool. Hurting people is not cool. That is not chill. I don't care what you call it. It is not what it's about. If you were to study the history of America, and I ask you to do this, in every 10 years, from the 60s to the 2022s, young people, old people, do this. Study the history from the 60s all the way up until now, every 10 years. Look at how the economy has changed, how the mindset, the paradigm has shifted from everything from the food to how they dress, to how they talk, to how they walk, to the music they listen to. And you will see that we gradually went from empowerment to education to being the best that we could be. From segregation all the way until now, we are living in a culture of death. Screw everybody and everything, and it's all about me. And the lack of respect of the sisters, the lack of respect of the brothers, the lack of respect of higher life. And with that being said, Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.